Most pilots, myself included, would probably say that learning to talk to air traffic control was one of the harder, or at least certainly more intimidating parts of becoming a pilot. Not for everyone, but for a lot of us, that can be kind of a hard step. It takes a while to gain proficiency. And so if that's you, you are not alone at all. Like I learned to fly in the Class B up here in Dallas, and like it was so intimidating. But I've gotten a lot better at it over time, just through practice and through a few light bulb moments that I want to share here on this video. There were 5 radio calls in particular that just I really stumbled with for a long time and stuff. And so I just kind of want to walk through the light bulb moments I had that have just made those easier. And a lot of it just comes with time and practice, but hopefully as I explain them to you, it'll make it easier for you. But I can really boil these things down to 2 things. And so if you don't take anything else away from this video, I hope you'll remember this. And the first is knowing what to expect. ATC will end up throwing you curveballs and stuff, and that's just part of it. But I would say like 98% of what they're giving you and what they're asking you and what they're telling you is standardized. It's the same stuff over and over and over. And so for all the different situations, if we can kind of know what is expected of us and know what to expect from them, that's going to make it so much easier. And that just comes from time and experience in the air, right? But that will help a lot. And so just give yourself a little bit of time if you're not there yet. But then the second thing that's so important is to remember to speak up if you're confused or you don't understand or you need clarification. Just remember you can speak up. It's so easy to just assume that because ATC assigned you something or told you something, you can just get really frantic and be like, oh, okay, and then try to read it back and just comply. And then all of a sudden you read back to them what they told you, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, gosh, what the heck did they just say? Like, what does that mean for me? What do I have to do? How do I put that into the GPS? Like, there's just questions you have, right? And so if you really are confused, like, just ask them, right? It's okay. They're human too. They're there to serve you, and it's easy to forget that, like, because you're just trying to comply, you're not trying to be in the way, and so you just want to stay out of the way of ATC. But sometimes that creates more problems than it solves. And so just remember that you can speak up. One of the favorite things I've ever heard on the radio a pilot say was, I heard an American Airlines captain like tell air traffic control in the Dallas Class B, said, "I'm confused. I want to be unconfused." And I don't remember the context, but I remember that. I remember exactly what he said. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. That's such a good lesson that you can just say, hey, I'm confused. I want to be unconfused. And so never forget that. So those are 2 key things. But going back to kind of the 5 different ATC calls that I struggled with, let's run through those and hopefully it will be helpful to you. The very first radio communication that I ever struggled with was talking at an uncontrolled airport. And I'll never forget it. I was like 14 years old. I was taking a lesson in a Super Cub, and my instructor had me do the radio call outs when we were coming back in to the airport. And he said, hey, Charlie, just say this. It's real simple. Just tell them, hey, Gillespie County Airport, Super Cub 24 Yankee is entering a 45 left downwind, landing runway 32 at Gillespie County. And that blew my mind. Like, I had no clue. So I had to do it like all choppy. It was like, Gillespie County, what do I say? Super Cub 24 Yankee. Okay, like I totally butchered it. I'm not even talking to air traffic control. It's uncontrolled, right? And I remember really struggling with that, like trying to have confidence, even just announcing what I'm doing to this, non-towered airport, right? And for a while, that was just kind of a stumbling block for me. I was like, man, what do I need to say? What do I not need to say? The FAA puts out all the content on exactly what you're supposed to say, so you can go read that and know what to expect, right? But I've thought about it a little bit differently in case, like, yeah, I've read, what you're supposed to say, but I'm having a hard time remembering it. Maybe I can offer this up to you, that the way that it started to make sense and really click for me was not to think about all the things I'm supposed to announce and when, but to think about it a little bit more logically, that really there's a flow to every announcement you're going to make in a non-towered airport. And I like to kind of think about it spatially, or like my position in relation to the airport or relation to other people. I'm kind of a visual learner. I like all the context. So the way I think about it is I go big circle. So I think of context. The first thing you announce is the airport you're referring to, right? Because you're on frequency with a bunch of different airports. So first you announce that. So it gives context for where you are. And then you bring it the circle really, really small into the cockpit with you. So you say Gillespie County Airport. Now I'm going to focus on me, and then I'm going to widen the rings from there. So Gillespie County Airport, Super Cub 24 Yankee, and then you announce where you are. So the ring starts to get a little bit bigger for me. Like I'm talking about the plane, now I'm talking about where the plane is, right? 24 Yankee is on left downwind, right? So you say where you are, and then you say what you're wanting to do, which is kind of a little bit of a wider ring, right? Because it involves not only where you are, but where you're wanting to go. So Super Cub 24 Yankee is on left downwind. We're landing runway 32. So those are your intentions. And then widen the ring a little bit bigger to go back to the airport, because you want to repeat the airport at the end of the transmission. So widening Gillespie County Airport, Super Cub 24 Yankee is on left downwind, landing runway 32, Gillespie County. So like big, small, back to big. So I've found that system to be really helpful for me when I'm talking at non-towered airports. So maybe that'll help you too. The second radio call I struggled with was reading back clearances, so IFR clearances or even VFR flight following instructions. And there's two easy things that help me tremendously. And the first one you're probably already familiar with is that it always follows the same acronym, CRAFT for IFR or RAFT for VFR. So for IFR, CRAFT being clearance limit, route, altitude, frequency, and transponder, right? And so you can write all those down, and it's really easy. For VFR, it's the same thing. It's routing, altitude, frequency, transponder. But the thing that really took this to the next level for me, because when you're writing out an IFR clearance, like sometimes there's so much to write, especially if you get like a really weird routing. But what's been really, really helpful is if you file for IFR within ForeFlight, they are going to end up sending you an email with your expected route. And that could be either as filed, which you already know the routing that you filed, or then give you your next one. And I found that about 90% of the time, what they're going to give you there from ATC is going to match that expected routing. And so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and pre-populate my CRAFT, checklist on my knee pad. And then if they read that back to me, I will just underline it. So like I don't have to write something that new, particularly if it's like a really long routing sequence. I can just underline it. And then if they give me some different, I cross it out and I write the new one. But that usually gets me like 60-70% of the clearance that I'm not having to write down in a frenzy. Because sometimes controllers, it seems like they want to see how fast they can talk to you when they're giving you your clearance, and like it's just hard to write that fast. But if you go and pre-fill out a lot of this stuff, all you have to do is I like to underline it if they give me what I expected, and if they give me some different, I just cross it out and write the new thing. But like it's way less writing because I've already filled in most of the template there. And then one more kind of hack that I like to use is I develop a short code for myself. So instead of having to write out verbatim really what they're telling you, like AF would be as filed, or RH would be runway heading, or direct would just be a D. And sometimes I put a little arrow through it, kind of like what it looks like on the Garmin to hit the direct button or something. So you can develop shorthand for yourself. So when they're reading all this stuff off to you, like you're just writing down 1 or 2 letter things in addition to already having your expected clearance, expected routing. And so it's just a combination of shorthand and underlining makes it super easy to read back. So I actually put out a whole video about this. So I talk about this method, and then I go do a real example and I demonstrate it for you. So the link will be up in the corner. Hope that can be a helpful resource to you. It makes reading back clearances just so much easier. But then again, remember the second principle that I talked about in this video is that if you don't know something, just have them read it back. Just tell them you're confused, or hey, I didn't catch that transponder code or whatever. Like they can help you, right? You don't have to nail it on the first try. Always feels good to nail it on the first try, but like not the end of the world if you need to ask them to repeat something. So just take the pressure off, but go watch that video. I think it'll help you kind of form a repeatable and quick system for yourself. So speaking of instrument flying, the third radio call that really tripped me up for a while was getting cleared for approaches. And so I found that this would just be like probably the longest radio call that like you ever receive. If you're nearing a final approach fix or something, and air traffic control is going to clear you for the approach, they're going to give you some transmission and it's like Skyline 6 Delta Foxtrot, you're 3 miles from Jarrett, turn left heading 180, maintain 2000 until established, you're cleared RNAV 15 approach into Addison. Like, what the heck? Like that's like 3 paragraphs like worth of Miranda rights that you're reading to me here that I have to abide by. And that always just became really difficult for me until after, many hours of getting my instrument and doing instrument training, I realized that it's the same cadence. I was talking to a controller that he manages San Antonio Tower. I had a phone call with him the other day. Really cool guy. Mike, shout out to you if you're watching. I said, hey, what's some of your advice for pilots? And this is one of the things that he talked about, that he said, hey, these clearances always follow the same cadence. And it's an acronym called PTAC, which I know we don't need another acronym because it's like, oh, aviation, it's easy. Just remember the acronym tomato flames. And like, it's an acronym on top of the 300 acronyms we always told you. So like, I'll tell you the acronym in case it's helpful for you, but I think the context and the logic of the acronym makes more sense than the acronym itself. But the acronym is PTAC, which is always going to be the way that they read it off to you, which stands for position, turn, altitude, and clearance. So again, PTAC doesn't really help me. I don't really love acronyms because when you have to memorize 300 of them, they start to lose their effectiveness. But kind of going back to that radio call, it started to make sense to me that like they're not giving you this really, really long statement of net new information. Most of what they're telling you, you're already either doing or you're already either like expecting, right? And so they're going to send you a paragraph of information on that clearance, but like it's not that net new. So, starting with your position, they're gonna say, hey, Skyline 6 Delta Foxtrot, you're 3 miles from Jarrett. Okay, you're 3 miles from the final approach fix. I'm flying the approach. I know that. I know that confirms where I am. I already know that. That's not something I have to read back. Okay, so I can kind of not forget it, but like I don't have to do anything with that information, right? You're 3 miles from Jarrett, turn left heading 180. Well, I'm expecting some type of intercept into the final approach course, right? Which is a heading 155 into Addison, for example. So he's gonna give me, a roughly 30 degree or whatever it's gonna be intercept. So like I'm expecting that already. So you go, okay, that's an instruction, turn left heading 180, maintain 2,000 feet until established. I'm probably already flying 2,000 feet, or that 2,000 feet will probably coincide with the approach plate. It's gonna be the assigned altitude of the approach anyways to hit your glide path intercept. So like that's probably not net new information, and it's assignment that I'm either on or I'm probably expecting anyways. So it's heading and altitude. Those are two things that are really important. And so you say, maintain 2,000 until established on the approach. Well, that's not net new information to me because I know I'm going to fly the approach and I know I want to be established on the approach. Then it'll say cleared, RNAV 15 into Addison. Well, that's the approach that I'm flying. I already know that I'm doing that. I'm expecting to be cleared to that, right? So like really all the net new information in that was really just a heading assignment and an altitude assignment. The altitude assignment I'm probably already on, right? So like it's not that much information. I can say, okay, cool. So I'll fly the heading. I'll maintain 2,000 until established on the approach that I requested, right? So that readback doesn't have to be net new information. It's already stuff that I'm expecting or stuff that I'm already doing, right? So PTAC might help you remember those things, but if nothing else, just think about it in context and really remember that it's always going to be that same cadence to get cleared for the approach, and it doesn't have to be as jumbled together in net new information as it might seem on the surface. It doesn't have to be that hard, and that's really helped me to increase my confidence level when it comes to reading back my clearances for approaches. Number 4 that would kind of trip me up was ATC using either landmarks or airports as waypoints as you're transitioning through an airspace. And this one can be a little bit harder to expect because especially if you're new to an area, like you don't know that they're gonna, tell you to use that common landmark or whatever. But if you start, going into the same airspace over and over, using that same airport as a waypoint, you might be able to start expecting it. So going back to my kind of 2 high-level points here of knowing what to expect and just asking ATC for clarification, this situation applies to both those things. So like if you don't know, like I remember I was going through Salt Lake City one time and not familiar with that. I was just transitioning through and I was talking to air traffic control, and they use like an amusement park as like a waypoint to help get you around. So they'll say, hey, fly over Happy Land and then heading 180 after that. And I'm like, I don't know what the heck Happy Land is, right? Like, or whatever it's called, but it's like an amusement park, which you think would be really easy to spot from the air, but if you're new to the area, it's just not, right? And so that situation, you can just ask for help. And so like ask for, identifiable highways or something, or like ask just for a heading. Say, hey, I'm not familiar with the area. Can you just give me a heading here? Because I don't know what I'm looking for or something. Like that's totally doable, right? So going back to my second point of just being able to speak up and ask for help, that's a really good example if they give you something that you weren't expecting. But then on the other hand, kind of knowing what to expect, that point number 1, I've noticed that like coming back into the Class B at DFW, they typically do use the airports airports as waypoints to kind of help you flow through the Metroplex. And so Dallas Executive, formerly known as Redbird, is if I'm coming from the south, a lot of times they'll say, hey, direct Redbird, direct Love, then direct Addison. And it's just kind of like a little bit of hopscotch to get up to my final destination. And so like I know if I'm coming from the south, that's not uncommon for me to receive. And so I can kind of expect it. But if I don't know to expect it, I can speak up and ask for help. So points number 1 and 2 that I've been covering throughout this video really apply to ATC giving you either landmarks or airports as waypoints. You could either learn to expect that as you become more familiar with the airport, the area, or if you're not, you can always just speak up and ask for help. So that would kind of throw me for a loop. And now that I know that people tend to do that, it gets a little bit less overwhelming for me. The fifth and final ATC call that was difficult for me was just generally flying in the Class B airspace. I'm really thankful that I learned here in Dallas. Dallas has some really great, really active Class B airspace. So like kind of grew up in it and stuff, but it's still really intimidating at first. And I know many pilots who just won't even touch Class B just because it's just too much. It's too intimidating. And like that's totally understandable because if you're used to flying at non-towered airports, like Class B is the total opposite of that, but it doesn't have to be hard. And so I really just want to boil it down to a few things that have made it way easier for me. And again, just like I've been kind of emphasizing this whole video, it really comes back to my 2 points, which is knowing what to expect and asking for help if you need it. Knowing what to expect really comes down to a couple things with Class B. And the first thing is getting the ATIS or the weather of your destination airport within that Class B airspace, because you're going to need to know what runway to expect. Like you're going to do that anyways, but that's going to be helpful information that ATC is probably going to ask you if you have the weather, so it's just one thing to get ahead. And the routing they give you is also going to really vary based off of what runway you're landing and stuff like that. So get the ATIS. You're already going to get it anyways, but get it hopefully before you call approach. So that'll help you really know what to expect. And then the second thing that you already know what to expect with Class B airspace is that you have to stay outside of it until you're cleared into it. So we already know to expect that, right? Like I know where I'm going, I know what traffic pattern is happening, I know which direction we're landing, and I know I need to stay out of the Class B until and unless they clear me through it, right? So already as you're talking through radio, it might sound crazy, like your assignment is trying to get to the airport but staying out of the Class B. So that already gives you kind of your instructions. And then the next thing is they're probably going to clear you into the Class B, or at least give you routing, beneath it or through it or around it. Eventually, once like you're talking to ATC and if they clear you into Class B, your job gets super easy because all you got to do is just do what they tell you. And they're just going to give you different, heading assignments and altitude assignments and kind of work you into the traffic pattern. And it can be really easy because then, you just have to kind of do what they say. And if you're confused or they're speaking too fast or not sure, what landmark they just told you to fly over, just ask for help. Again, it comes back to knowing what to expect and not being afraid to ask for help. And so if you do those 3 things, you get the ATIS ahead of time so you know what to expect at the airport. You stay out of Class B until and unless you're cleared into it, and then you just do what they tell you. Like it can be super, super simple to fly into Class B. And I think, when you are listening to the radio, it can be so overwhelming because it's like, gosh, there's like not even a free time to jump in on the radio here. Like just calm down. It's okay, especially if you haven't contacted them yet. Just don't enter the Class B. If you need to go do circles or something, you can. But you'll find a window in there to talk to them. But a lot of it, there's so much chatter, but like so much of it doesn't apply to you because they're talking to so many people, jets that are miles and miles away from you and things. So it can sound way more intimidating than it actually ends up being. And I think you'll find that they're really there to help you. They want to help you. And it gets really easy whenever you get cleared in the Class B because then they just tell you what to do and you just do it. So if you want a live working example of this, I filmed a video. I'll put a link in the corner here where I filmed myself flying from south of DFW back into my home airport of Addison. I think it was a fun demonstration of how the Class B can be busy, but it doesn't have to be scary. And so I hope that will be a resource to you. So if you'd like more tips on how to get better talking to air traffic control, I put together another video. I'll link it up in the corner. That's 15 ways to instantly get better talking to ATC. Now, I'm not perfect by any means. I'm not a know-it-all, but I've done a lot of flying here in and around the Class B airspace in Dallas. And so as I look back on my training and just building proficiency and now feeling very comfortable flying around here, I just go back and document all the different tips and tricks and resources and flows and commonalities and things that I've noticed over the course of time that have really helped me build confidence with air traffic control. And I'm really confident it can be a helpful resource to you if you're still, trying to grow in your confidence level talking to controllers. And so definitely go watch that video. And if you have any other questions or other tips that I haven't covered here, feel free to leave them down in the comments section. But thanks for watching. I hope that this video is a resource to you in your aviation journey, and I'll see you guys next week.